The galaxy had a rule: never call the humans unless you want a war. But when the skies turned to fire and the last shelters started to fail, one trembling hand sent the forbidden signal anyway. And far beyond the burning world, something ancient and stubborn inside humanity woke up, like a predator hearing fear in the dark. The burning of Lyra. The planet Lyra was famous for its soft blue rings and floating cities. It was the kind of world tourists called peaceful. The kind of world that believed diplomacy could solve anything. That belief died in 3 days. From the sky, the invasion looked unreal, like a slow storm made of metal. The Carvax Dominion arrived without warning. Their ships were not sleek or beautiful. They were thick, heavy, and cruel, shaped like hammered blades. They didn't speak first. They didn't negotiate. They simply opened fire. The orbital defense grid lasted 26 minutes. After that, the bombardment began. In the capital Arc City, Elandra Drift, alarms screamed until the speakers melted. Streets that had once held art markets now held smoke and broken glass. The water gardens boiled. The air tasted like burned plastic and salt. Deep underground, where the stone was thick enough to block radiation and heat, Ambassador Rhys Talon stared at a live satellite feed. She was not a soldier. She was a diplomat, trained to keep her voice calm even when others shouted. But now her fingers shook against the edge of the console as she watched whole districts vanish in silent white flashes. A soft voice came from behind her. "Ambassador," the casualty projection updated. Rhys didn't turn. "Say it." Her aide, Mektaro, swallowed. 412 million confirmed dead. Another 700 million unaccounted. Rhys blinked slowly, as if blinking could clean the horror from her eyes. It didn't. Every number felt like a planet falling apart inside her chest. Above them, the Carvax ships kept firing, not because they needed to, but because terror was part of their method. They did not just conquer worlds. They broke them first. The council that couldn't save anyone. In the emergency chamber, the surviving leaders of Lyra gathered around a circular holotable. Their faces were lit by the blue glow of incoming messages, most of them useless. Chancellor Varen stood at the center, old and thin, his voice rough from smoke. "We contacted the Neutral Federation," he said. "They are deeply concerned." Someone made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "We contacted the Sable Consortium," Varen continued. "They will accept refugees. Only if we reach them ourselves." Mech slammed his hand on the table. "How? The Dominion owns our space lanes." No one answered. There was no answer. Another leader, Minister Jorah Hal, leaned forward. Her eyes were red from sleeplessness. "What about the Galactic Assembly? Surely they—" Varen's gaze dropped. "They've scheduled a vote." "How long?" Rhys asked, already knowing. 5 months. The room filled with a heavy silence. 5 months was not a political delay. It was a death sentence. Then Varen tapped the holotable and played the only direct reply they had received from the Carvax Dominion. A harsh, buzzing voice filled the chamber. "Lyra belongs to the Dominion by right of strength. Interference will be treated as aggression. Submission will be rewarded with survival. Resistance will be rewarded with extinction." The message ended. The holotable dimmed. The silence after it felt like a lid closing on a coffin. Rhys looked around the room. She saw fear. She saw surrender. She saw leaders beginning to prepare themselves to negotiate, which was just a polite word for slavery. And something inside her snapped. The forbidden name. "There is one more option," Rhys said. Heads turned. A few leaders stiffened like prey smelling a predator. Minister Jorah's voice was thin. "Ambassador, don't." Rhys stood. "We have begged everyone who calls themselves civilized. We got speeches. We got pity. We got schedules." Chancellor Varen's eyes narrowed. "What are you proposing?" Rhys took a breath. She felt the weight of history pressing against her tongue. "We call the Terrans." The room reacted instantly. One leader whispered a prayer. Another stood up and backed away as if the word itself carried disease. Minister Jorah's voice rose. The humans are Deathworlders. They're classified beyond safe contact in half the Academy texts. Yes, Rise said. And the sky is on fire. So maybe safe contact is no longer the priority. Mech stared at her. You mean Earth? Rise nodded. The Terran systems. Chancellor Varant's hands tightened into fists. You know what the stories say. Rise did. Everyone did. Humans came from a world that tried to kill them every day. Storms, predators, poison, disease, earthquakes, war. And instead of dying, they learned. They adapted. They fought their environment, then fought each other, then somehow forged unity out of chaos. The galaxy didn't fear them because they were the strongest. The galaxy feared them because humans were the species that didn't stop when logic said stop. Minister Jorah shook her head hard. If we bring them here, we invite a war that could burn half the sector. Rise looked at the satellite feed still playing in the corner, another city disappearing in a flare. Half the sector isn't burning, she said quietly. Just us. The SOS. The chamber fell into a long, trembling pause. Then Chancellor Varant spoke, voice low. If we call them, and they come, we may never be seen as independent again. Rise met his eyes. If we don't call them, there will be no independence left to protect. She stepped to the transmitter console. Her hands finally stopped shaking, not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear had been replaced by something sharper, decision. She began recording the message. Her voice stayed steady, simple, direct, no dramatic words, no begging. This is Ambassador Rise Talon of Lyra. The Carvax Dominion has invaded our system. Our defenses are destroyed. Our population is being exterminated. We requested aid from the Assembly and received delay. She paused, then added the only sentence that mattered. We are asking humanity for help. She ended the message with coordinates and a final note. We are still alive. For now. Then she hit send. The signal leapt into the relay network, racing across space like a thrown knife. Around her, leaders watched as if they had just committed a crime against fate itself. The answer begins. Hours later, on the outer edge of Lyra's system, a Carvax sensor officer froze at his station. Over, Commander, we're detecting distortions. The Carvax bridge was loud with victory preparations, but the officer's voice cut through. Repeat. Multiple FTL exit signatures. Not assembly patterns. Not consortium. The main display shifted. Points of light began to appear like sparks in black water. The officer swallowed. They matched Terran engineering. Terran drive curves. Terran thermal profile. The overcommander leaned forward slowly, as if his body didn't want to accept what his mind already understood. How many? He asked. The officer's claws trembled above the console. It's still counting. On burning Lyra, far underground, Ambassador Rise didn't know any of this yet. She only felt the planet shudder, and listened to the distant thunder of another bombardment wave starting. She whispered into the dark, not to any god, not to any council, but to the cold space between stars. Please, let them be the kind of monsters who protect. The signal reaches the wrong people. The SOS arrived in Terran space like a stone thrown through a quiet window. At Relay Station K7, a small communications outpost built into a dead asteroid, the lights were low and the night shift was slow. Most alarms were false. Most distress calls were accidents. Most urgent messages were political noise. Then the screen flashed priority. Extinction event. Lieutenant Mara Klein leaned forward so fast her chair rolled back. Her short hair was still damp from a rushed shower, and her eyes were tired, until they weren't. She opened the message. The file was not long. No long speeches. No begging. Just facts, and then the sentence that made her stomach drop. We are asking humanity for help. Mara stared at the words for a heartbeat, then shouted down the corridor. Captain! You need to see this, now. Captain Darius Holt arrived in seconds, uniform half-fastened, boots unlaced. He took one look at the header and went pale. "That's not a prank?" he asked. Mara shook her head. "It came through 3 independent relay routes. It's real." Holt read the message twice. His jaw tightened the way humans did when they didn't want their emotions to show. "Get me fleet command," he said. "Secure line." Mara hesitated. "Sir, if we escalate this wrong." Holt cut her off, calm but sharp. "If we delay this wrong, a civilization dies. Patch it through." Fleet Command doesn't sleep. On the massive station Port Resolute, Fleet Command lived inside layers of metal and security. It was built like a bunker because humans believed in a simple rule. If someone wants peace, they hide behind words. If someone wants survival, they prepare. Admiral Jun Park was in his office when the call came. He looked older than his 48 years, not from age, but from responsibility. His hands were steady as he watched the SOS replay on his screen. When it ended, he didn't speak for a long moment. His aide, Commander Sana Iqbal, waited. Finally Park said, "They didn't call anyone else by name." Sana nodded. "The message implies they already tried the assembly." Park exhaled through his nose, controlled anger. So the galaxy did what it always does. It condemned the violence and scheduled a meeting. "And the Carvax?" Sana asked. Park tapped a file. "Raiders turned Empire. Their pattern is consistent: fast strike, orbital terror, slavery, or extinction." Sana's expression hardened. "We've seen them near fringe systems." Park stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, the stars looked calm. Like they didn't care who burned. "Send the SOS to the Terran Senate," Sana said carefully. "Protocol requires." Park turned slowly. Protocol also requires a living planet to protect. He looked at the screen again, at the ambassador's tired voice, at the background tremor in the audio as bombs fell. Then Park said the sentence that always changed everything. "Mobilize." Sana blinked. "Sir, that's a full act of war level decision." Park nodded. "Yes." "How many ships?" Park didn't even hesitate. "All of them that can arrive fast enough to matter." Humans don't wait for a vote. Within 30 minutes, the emergency line lit up across Terran space. On colony worlds, alarms sounded on docks. On mining platforms, workers stopped mid-shift. On patrol ships, sleepy crews sat up straight. A message ran through the Navy channels, simple and blunt. "Civilian world under extermination attack. Requested Terran aid. Volunteers authorized. Rally point, Lyra Edge." Then Park did something most alien governments would never understand. He sent it publicly. Not to scare the enemy. Not to flex. To invite every human who still believed in decency. The civilian networks exploded with argument, fear, and anger. Some people said, "Not our problem." Others replied, "Then whose problem is it?" A popular commentator shouted into a camera, "If we let them die because it's inconvenient, we deserve to be alone forever." A mechanic on a cargo hauler posted a video from the engine bay, wiping oil off his hands. "My ship isn't a warship," he said. "But it carries food, meds, and hope. We're going." Within hours, civilian convoys began forming behind the Navy. Hospital ships, freight haulers, rescue tugs, even old retired corvettes pulled out of storage and upgraded with whatever weapons would fit. Humanity had many flaws, but one trait stayed the same across every border. When humans chose to help, they helped loudly. The first message to the Carvax. The Terran Senate demanded an explanation, of course. Senators argued about treaties, costs, and risk. Admiral Park ignored them. He didn't ignore democracy, he simply understood time. Votes took days. Bombardments took minutes. At the edge of Terran space, the Third Rapid Response Fleet assembled. Sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers, drone carriers, electronic warfare ships, and a few older battleships that still had teeth. On the flagship TNS Iron Promise, Captain Leona Rourke watched the star map. She was a combat captain, not a politician. Her crew trusted her because she never lied to them. She opened the ship-wide channel. "Listen up," she said. "We're going to Lyra." They asked for help. "The Carvax Dominion is bombing cities from orbit. There will be combat. Some of us won't come back." The ship fell silent. Rourke continued, voice steady. "But I want you to remember something. Humans were not born in comfort. We were born in storms. We learned to build fire in rain. We learned to stand up with broken bones. We learned to keep moving when the world said stop." She paused. "Today, someone asked if we could do that for them." A quiet roar rose through the ship, hands hitting metal, boots stamping decks, the sound of humans choosing a side. Rourke ended with a final line. "Set your hearts. Set your aim. We jump in 12 minutes." On Lyra, hope has a sound. Back on Lyra, the underground shelter systems were running out of air filters. In shelter grid 12, a mother held her child under a blanket to block the dust. The child kept asking the same question. "Are we going to die?" The mother couldn't lie. Not anymore. She just whispered, "I don't know." Above them, the ground shook again. In the government bunker, Ambassador Rye's Talon watched their last orbital sensors flicker and fail one by one. Mech Taro leaned close. "We're blind soon," he said. "If anyone comes, we might not even see them." Rise swallowed hard. "Then we listen." "What?" She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the old saying from her youth. When the sky is silent, death is near. When the sky screams, something is fighting. A few minutes later, their bunker speakers crackled. "Ambassador, incoming broadcast." Rise stood so fast her chair fell. The audio came through with static at first, then cleared into a human voice, female, firm, and very calm. "This is Captain Leona Rourke of the Terran Navy ship Iron Promise. We received your SOS." Rise's breath caught. The voice continued. "We are en route to your system at maximum speed. Estimated arrival, 22 hours. 22 hours. It sounded like forever, and like a miracle, at the same time. Rourke's tone sharpened. "To the Carvax Dominion, you are engaged in hostile extermination action against a civilian world. Stand down and withdraw. You have 1 hour after our arrival to leave the system. There will be no second warning." The message ended. In the bunker, people stared at one another as if they had forgotten how to breathe. Mech whispered, "They're coming." Rise's voice shook. "They're coming." And then, for the first time in days, someone in the room laughed, not because it was funny, but because hope was too big to hold quietly. The Carvax hear the Terrans. On the bridge of the Carvax flagship chain of Dominion, Overcommander Valkyrus H listened to the human transmission. He watched his officers shift uneasily. No one wanted to be the first to say the word out loud. "Humans." Valkyr's throat plates flexed as he spoke. "They are far away." "Yes, Overcommander," his sensor officer said. "But their drive signatures, they are pushing maximum output." Valkyr clicked his claws on the armrest. "How many?" "Initial estimate, 300 warships. More behind." Valkyr's lip curled. "We have 800 in system." One officer dared to speak. "Overcommander, humans don't fight like others." Valkyr's eyes narrowed. "They bleed like others." He rose to full height, voice loud for the entire bridge. "Continue the bombardment. Prepare intercept groups. When the Terrans arrive, we will crush their pride and show the galaxy that Deathworlders are not gods." The officers answered in unison. But their voices lacked confidence. Because deep down, even predators knew the difference between prey that runs and prey that runs toward you. The jump that will shake the sector. At the edge of Lyra's system, the first faint distortions appeared, tiny ripples in space, like the universe flinching. Carvax sensors screamed. More ripples appeared. Then more. And more. Captain Rourke stood on the bridge of Iron Promise, hands behind her back, eyes locked on the forward display. "Steady," she said. Her navigator counted softly. 5, 12, 20, 40. The stars bent. Space tore. And the first Terran ship emerged like a blade drawn from a sheath. Then another. Then another. The human fleet poured in, not in a neat, polite formation, but like a storm choosing its own shape. Rourke didn't smile. She simply said, "Broadcast on all channels." Her comms officer nodded. Rourke leaned toward the MIC and spoke the words the galaxy would remember. "Lyra, we heard you." The moment before impact. Space had a sound, at least, that was how the Carvax crews described it when fear crawled into their instincts. On the bridge of the Chain of Dominion, Overcommander Valkyr SOS watched the human fleet finish its arrival. The Terran ships did not spread into a wide defensive arc like sensible species did. They didn't form layered shield walls or hide behind carriers. They moved forward. Straight toward Carvax territory. Sensor Officer Krell spoke with unease. "They are not holding position, Overcommander. They are advancing." Valkyr's claws tightened. "Then we meet them." He activated the fleet channel. "Intercept groups Alpha through Delta, move to engage. Break their formation before reinforcements arrive. Show them numbers still matter." 800 Carvax warships began to shift. Massive engines roared as armored hulls aligned into traditional assault blocks, dense, powerful, overwhelming. Against them, barely 300 Terran ships burned bright. On Lyra's surface, Ambassador Rise Talon watched the sensor feeds from the bunker. Red markers flooded the display. "They're going to collide," Mech whispered. Rise nodded. "Yes. And humanity doesn't collide by accident." Human preparations. On the bridge of the Iron Promise, Captain Leona Rourke listened to the tactical updates. "Enemy intercept groups forming," her tactical officer said. "Standard Carvax doctrine. Dense push, shield first." Rourke nodded. "Predictable." Her first officer raised an eyebrow. "They outnumber us more than 2 to 1. "Yes," Rourke replied calmly. "Which means they think they've already won." She tapped her command console. "All ships, Phase 1. Ghost lanterns, deploy." Across the human fleet, hundreds of small objects dropped away from hulls, dark, cold, almost invisible against space. No engines. No emissions. No shields. Carvax sensors ignored them. They shouldn't have. The lanterns wake up. As the Carvax intercept groups closed in, Valkyr allowed himself a slow, confident breath. His gunnery officers waited for firing range. Then his sensor chief froze. "Overcommander, we're detecting anomalies." Valkyr snapped his head around. "Explain." "Multiple objects. They were already there. Passive until now." The tactical display flickered. Then space lit up. Hundreds of human ghost lanterns activated simultaneously. Small, cheap, unmanned devices that did one simple thing very well. They screamed. Not with sound, but with data. Every frequency. Every band. Every sensor type. Carvax targeting systems flooded with false readings. Thousands of phantom ships appeared where none existed. Enemy vectors multiplied. Distance markers warped. Shield telemetry contradicted itself. "Targeting failure," an officer shouted. "We can't lock." "Shut them down." Valkyr roared. But the lanterns were already dying, burning themselves out after doing their job. They didn't need to last. They only needed to last long enough. Humans don't fight fair. Captain Rourke watched the chaos ripple through the enemy formation. "Phase 2, she said. "Break them." The Terran fleet split, not away, but through the confusion. Human ships surged forward at acceleration rates no Carvax body could survive. Inertial dampeners screamed. Crew members gritted teeth as gravity tried to crush them into the decks. But humans had grown up on a heavy world. Pain was not a stop signal. It was information. Destroyers knifed between Carvax cruisers, firing point-blank. Railguns punched holes through armor that had never been designed for close combat. Plasma lances burned across shield generators before the Carvax could react. One Terran frigate rammed straight through the gap between two enemy ships, released a swarm of drones directly inside their shield envelope, and vanished in a flash of thrust. The drones exploded inside. "Enemy vessels are collapsing formation," a Carvax officer cried. Valka's jaw clenched. "Hold the line." But there was no line anymore. A lesson in sacrifice. On the Terran cruiser TNS Resolve, Commander Isaac Moreno gripped the armrest as his ship shuddered. "Shields down to 12%, his engineer reported. "Hull breach on Deck 5. Moreno didn't hesitate. "Seal it. Keep firing." Their target, a massive Carvax battle carrier, loomed ahead, guns blazing. Weapons Officer Chen looked at him. "Sir, we won't survive another pass." Moreno nodded once. "I know." He opened the fleet channel. "Resolve to Iron Promise. We're going to punch a hole." Rourke's voice came back instantly. "Copy. Resolve. You don't have to." Moreno smiled, though no one could see it. "Yeah. We do." Resolve surged forward, engines screaming beyond safety limits. Carvax fire tore chunks from its hull. Atmosphere vented into space. Moreno stayed calm. "Fire everything." The Resolve unleashed every weapon it had, railguns, missiles, point defense cannons, all focused on the carrier's core. The Carvax ship exploded in a sun-bright flash. So did the Resolve. On Iron Promise, the bridge went silent. Rourke closed her eyes for half a second. Then she said, "Mark them remembered. Push through." Human ships did not slow down. The Carvax began to break. On the chain of Dominion, Valka watched his intercept groups disintegrate. "Casualty report," he demanded. The answer came with visible fear. Intercept Group Alpha, 40% lost. Beta, 52%. Delta is retreating. "How?" Valka roared. "They are fewer." "They don't retreat, Over-Commander," the officer said quietly. "Even when damaged. They keep attacking." Valka stared at the display. Human ships burned, cracked, venting, but they still advanced. "They are bleeding," Valka said. "Why don't they stop?" No one answered. Because the answer was simple and terrifying. Humans didn't fight to survive. They fought to finish. Hope reaches the surface. On Lyra, the bombardment paused again. This time, it didn't resume. In the shelters, people noticed the silence. The ground stopped shaking. Dust settled. A child whispered, "Is it over?" Above the planet, Terran ships positioned themselves between Lyra and the remaining Carvax fleet, damaged, scarred, but unyielding. Ambassador Rise stared at the display, tears running freely now. "They are holding them," she whispered. Mech nodded in awe. "They're protecting us." Rise felt something new bloom in her chest, not relief, not joy, but understanding. The galaxy had misunderstood humanity. Humans were not dangerous because they loved war. They were dangerous because they refused to accept a world where evil went unanswered. A predator recognizes another. Over-Commander Valka stood frozen. His fleet still outnumbered the humans. But his confidence was gone. These were not cowards. Not diplomats. Not conquerors playing at empire. These were survivors. Valka activated a private channel, his voice lower now. "Signal all units. Pull back to maximum weapons range. No more close engagement." An officer hesitated. "Over-Commander, that concedes control of the planet." Valka's eyes burned. "If we don't adapt, we lose everything." He looked at the human ships again. They weren't retreating. They weren't celebrating. They were waiting. As if daring the Carvax to try again. Valka felt it then, something his species rarely admitted. Fear. Not of death. But of an enemy who had just begun to show what it could really do. The galaxy watches. Across the sector, neutral observation probes recorded everything. Analysts replayed the footage again and again. The lanterns. The charges. The sacrifice. The refusal to disengage. One phrase began to circulate quietly through intelligence networks. Humans weaponize hope. On Iron Promise, Captain Rourke stood tall. Fleet, she said softly, Phase 1 complete. The stars burned around them. And far behind the human lines, more Terran fleets were still coming. The silence after the storm. For the first time since the invasion began, space around Lyra went quiet. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but tense, like a held breath. The remaining Carvax warships pulled back to extreme weapons range, forming a wide, glittering arc around the system. Their guns stayed powered. Their shields stayed high. They stopped charging forward, stopped trying to overwhelm. They began to wait. On the surface of Lyra, people felt the change before they understood it. The sky was no longer ripping itself apart. Emergency broadcasts crackled with confusion instead of screams. In the bunker, Ambassador Rhys Talon leaned heavily against the console. Her legs trembled now that adrenaline no longer carried her. "They've stopped," Mech said quietly. "For now," Rhys replied. "Predators rest before the next strike." Above the planet, Captain Leona Rourke studied the enemy formation. "They're switching doctrine," her tactical officer said. "Long-range attrition. Missile saturation. Drone harassment." Rourke nodded. "That's the smart move." Her first officer frowned. "We can't match them shot for shot at range. Not with their numbers." Rourke's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something sharper. "Good," she said. "Then we won't." The human way of thinking. On the bridge of the Iron Promise, officers moved with controlled urgency. Damage teams patched hull breaches. Medical crews worked non-stop. Names of the fallen scrolled silently on a side display. Rourke stared at those names for a moment longer than necessary. Then she turned back to the war. "All ships," she said, voice calm and steady, "prepare for Phase 3. The channel filled with acknowledgements. Her first officer leaned closer. "You're sure?" Rourke met his eyes. The Carvax believe war is about pressure. About grinding an enemy down until they submit. She gestured at the enemy fleet. "They think they've bought time." She paused. "They don't understand what humans do with time." The second trick begins. Far from the front line, something strange started happening. Carvax sensor arrays began detecting nothing. Entire regions of space went dark, not empty, but unreadable. Radiation levels flattened. Background noise vanished. "It's a sensor malfunction," one Carvax analyst insisted. But then another system went blind. And another. On the chain of dominion, Overcommander Valkus slammed a claw into the console. "Report." "Multiple zones of sensor blackout," the officer said. "No emissions. No reflections. It's like space itself is swallowing our scans." Valka's instincts screamed danger. What are the humans doing? No one answered, because the humans weren't broadcasting their intentions. They were hiding them. Ghost space. Human ships began deploying a new network, vast clouds of micromachines, smaller than dust, released silently into the void. They didn't explode. They didn't transmit. They absorbed. Light. Radar. Energy leakage. Anything that touched them vanished into statistical noise. To the Carvax, it looked like empty space. To humans, it was cover. On Iron Promise, Rourke watched the map shift as entire corridors of space disappeared from enemy awareness. "Ghost space established," her science officer reported. "They can't see through it." Rourke nodded. "Good. Now we move inside their blind spots." The Terran fleet adjusted position, not retreating, not advancing, but sliding sideways through invisible corridors the enemy didn't know existed. The Carvax fired long-range salvos anyway, missiles and plasma arcs tearing through space. They hit nothing. The first siege breaks. Hours passed. Then the first Carvax supply carrier vanished. No explosion. No warning. Just gone. Moments later, another escort cruiser disappeared from sensors. Valka's breathing grew heavy. Find them. We can't, the sensor officer whispered. They're attacking from within the blind zones. Human strike groups emerged from ghost space like phantoms, fast, precise, brutal. They targeted logistics first, fuel ships, ammo carriers, command relays. They didn't stay. They struck and vanished again. Karvak's crews began whispering the word their kind rarely used. Hunters. A different kind of courage. On the Terran destroyer TNS Arrowfall, Lieutenant Noah Reyes checked his squad status. All systems green, his pilot said. We're ghosts. Reyes nodded. His hands were steady, not because he wasn't afraid, but because fear had become familiar. Remember, he said, we're not here to be heroes. The pilot smirked. Just monsters. Reyes allowed a small smile. Just effective. Their ship slipped out of ghost space behind a Karvak's command frigate. One clean shot disabled its engines. A second silenced its communications. Then Arrowfall vanished again. Inside the crippled frigate, panic spread. Officers shouted orders that never reached anyone. Their fleet had numbers. But numbers meant nothing when you couldn't see who was killing you. The planet breathes again. On Lyra, evacuation shuttles finally began to fly. Human escort fighters flanked them closely, painted in dull grey instead of heroic colors. A Lyran civilian stared at one through a viewport and whispered, "They look damaged." The human pilot glanced sideways and shrugged. "Still flying," she said. "That's enough." Ambassador Rise watched children board a medical transport. Some waved at the human crews. Others simply stared in silent awe. "They're not even asking for permission," Mech said. Rise shook her head. "They already asked the only question that matters." She watched another shuttle lift off. "How many can we save?" Mech checked the numbers. Millions. Rise closed her eyes. That was enough. The Karvaks realized the truth. On the chain of dominion, Valka finally understood. The humans weren't trying to defeat him quickly. They were dismantling him slowly. Attrition, but not the kind he understood. Not bodies. Systems. Confidence. Time. "They are turning the siege against us," Valka said quietly. An officer looked at him in disbelief. "But we have superior range." Valka's voice was low, heavy. "Range doesn't matter if you can't see what you're shooting." He stared at the display, at shrinking supply lines, failing relays, and ships that vanished without warning. "We are bleeding without battle," he said. For the first time in his long career, Valka felt trapped. Humanity's message to the galaxy. Neutral observers transmitted emergency updates across the sector. Analysts struggled to explain what they were seeing. "The Terrans are not advancing," one report said. "They are controlling the environment." Another stated it more simply. Humans don't just fight enemies. They fight circumstances. On Iron Promise, Rourke listened to the updates and allowed herself one quiet breath. "Phase 3 progressing," she said. Her first officer glanced at the display of incoming signals. "Captain, additional Terran fleets are entering the outer system." Rourke nodded. "Good," she said. "Now we end this." She looked at Lyra, still scarred, still burning in places, but alive. Then she turned back to the enemy. "All units," Rourke said, voice steady and unmistakably human, "prepare Phase 4. The Karvaks thought they had faced the worst. They were wrong. Desperation has a sound. Desperation, unlike fear, makes noise. On the bridge of the chain of dominion, alarms screamed without pause. Supply indicators flashed red. Command relays dropped one by one. Ships that had never known retreat drifted powerless in ghost space corridors they could not map. Overcommander Valka SOH felt the weight of failure press into his chest plates. "They are starving us," he said slowly. "Not of food. Of certainty." A junior officer hesitated, then spoke. "Overcommander, authorization request for Scorch Pattern." The bridge went silent. Scorch Pattern was not a battle tactic. It was a message, burn everything, civilian and military alike, until the enemy broke. It was extinction, stripped of excuses. Valka's claws trembled. If he ordered it, the galaxy would remember the Karvax not as conquerors, but as monsters without restraint. But monsters were losing. Authorize it, Valka said. The sky tries to kill again. On Lyra, warning sirens returned, different this time. Deeper. More urgent. Ambassador Rise Talon felt her blood turn cold as the sensors updated. They're retargeting the planet, Mech said, horror in his voice. High-yield saturation. They're going to crack the atmosphere. Rise didn't hesitate. Open a channel to the humans. All frequencies. Above the planet, Captain Leona Rourke saw the same data and felt the shift immediately. They're going for terror, her tactical officer said. Full civilian annihilation. Rourke's jaw tightened. No, she said. They're going for us. She opened the fleet channel. All Terran units. Karvax have escalated to planetary destruction protocols. She paused, then said the words that changed the war. Humanity answers together. The call that echoed across space. The signal didn't stay within military channels. It spilled outward, into civilian bands, reserve networks, private fleets, and outdated comm relays that hadn't been used in years. A simple message repeated. Planetary extermination in progress. Civilians under threat. Humanity requested. And humanity responded. Mining ships rerouted mid-haul. Medical fleets burned hard toward danger. Old war veterans reactivated mothballed cruisers with shaking hands and steady eyes. On a distant agricultural moon, a retired pilot named Evelyn Cross watched the broadcast, then stood up from her porch. Well, she muttered, guess I'm not done yet. Her ship launched 2 hours later. The wall of human ships. The Karvax fired. Long-range annihilation beams tore toward Lyra, designed to boil oceans and shred atmosphere. They never reached the planet. Human ships moved, not in neat formations, not in tactical perfection, but in instinctive alignment, sliding into place between death and the innocent. Some were warships. Some were not. Cargo hulls bristled with jury-rigged shields. Hospital ships overcharged their deflectors until med bays lost gravity. Civilian freighters dumped entire fuel reserves into shield generators. A Terran engineer shouted over comms, "This isn't what we're built for." The response came instantly from a dozen ships. Then build it anyway. The sky filled with human hulls, scarred and mismatched, forming a living barrier. The Karvax beams struck. And stopped. The price humans pay. Ships screamed. Shields collapsed. Metal vaporized. Human vessels burned, broke, and drifted, but they held. On the TNS Brightwater, Captain Jonah Hale watched his shield percentage drop into single digits. "Evac?" his first officer asked. Hale shook his head. "Not yet." Another hit rocked the ship. Hull breach. Multiple decks. Hale closed his eyes briefly, then opened a channel. Brightwater to fleet. Shields failing. But we're still in the line. Rourke's voice came back, raw and fierce. "Copy. Brightwater. You're not alone." Hale smiled as the next beam hit, and slid sideways as another Terran ship moved in front of him, taking the strike instead. Humanity didn't fight as individuals. They fought as neighbors. The galaxy watches in silence. Across neutral systems, observers stopped pretending this was just another conflict. This was not conquest. This was not defense. This was a species choosing who it wanted to be. One analyst said quietly, "They're dying for a world that isn't theirs." Another replied, "No. They're living for it." The Karvax break. On the chain of dominion, Valka watched the scorch pattern fail. The planet still lived. The humans still stood. And worse, the humans were advancing again, using their own burning ships as cover. "They're insane," an officer whispered. Valka shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "They are decided." He saw it now. The truth his tutors had warned him about. Humans did not ask if victory was possible. They asked if surrender was acceptable. And for them, it never was. The turning point. Additional Terran fleets arrived, fresh, organized, relentless. The Carvax formations began to collapse inward, losing space, losing cohesion. Valka stared at the tactical map and finally understood the outcome. If he stayed, the Dominion would be erased. If he fled, the galaxy would remember. He opened a channel to all remaining Carvax ships. Prepare withdrawal. An officer stared at him. Over, Commander, we still. We are beaten, Valka said quietly. By something numbers cannot defeat. He turned to the human fleet one last time. They didn't conquer us, he whispered. They outgrew us. On Lyra, the sky clears. The beams stopped. The silence returned, but this time, it was gentle. Ambassador Rise collapsed into a chair, tears streaming freely. We're alive, Mech said, laughing and crying at once. We're actually alive. Above them, human ships remained in place, burned, scarred, glowing with emergency lights. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They simply stayed. Because that was what humans did. The war isn't over. On Iron Promise, Captain Rourke watched the retreating Carvax fleet. Pursue, her tactical officer asked. Rourke shook her head. No, she said. They'll remember this longer if they live. She opened a fleet-wide channel. Humanity, hold position. Medical teams first. Then relief. Her voice softened. Good work. And across hundreds of ships, exhausted humans nodded, not as heroes, but as people who had done what needed doing. The galaxy had just learned something new. When humans answered an SOS, they didn't just bring fleets. They brought each other. Silence that felt unfamiliar. When the last Carvax ship vanished into faster than light, the stars around Lyra did not cheer. They simply remained. For the people on the planet below, that silence was almost frightening. 4 days, noise had meant survival, sirens, impacts, warnings. Now there was only wind over broken cities and the low hum of emergency generators. Ambassador Rise Talon stepped out of the bunker for the first time since the invasion began. The sky above her was scarred, streaked with smoke and ash, but it was whole. No beams fell from it. No shadows of enemy ships passed overhead. She breathed in carefully. The air tasted burned, but it was breathable. We survived, she whispered, not fully believing it. Mech stood beside her, eyes wide. The humans are still there. Above the planet, hundreds of Terran ships held position like silent guardians, some intact, many damaged, all refusing to leave. They didn't look victorious. They looked tired. Humanity does not leave wounds untended. Relief operations began immediately. Human doctrine treated aftermath as part of war, not its end. Hospital ships descended into orbit, their bays opening like massive lungs. Shuttles moved non-stop, carrying injured civilians up and supplies down. Engineers landed near collapsed power grids before politicians even drafted requests. On the ground, a human medic knelt beside a wounded Lyran child. His gloves were stained with blood, blue blood, not his own. Easy, he said gently. You're safe now. The child stared at him, confused. You stayed, she said in halting common. You didn't leave. The medic smiled tiredly. Yeah. We tend to do that. Nearby, a Terran engineer argued with a Lyran infrastructure officer. This bridge is gone, the alien said. We'll need years to rebuild. The engineer shook his head. Nah. Months. How? The human tapped his datapad. We already started. The cost is counted. On the Iron Promise, Captain Leona Rourke stood alone in the observation bay. Below her, recovery teams collected debris, human and Carvax alike. Names scrolled across a memorial display, each one steady, unchanging. She did not cry. She remembered. Admiral Jun Park arrived quietly behind her. You held, he said. Rourke nodded. We lost a lot. Park's voice was heavy. We always do. He paused, then added, the Senate voted. Rourke didn't turn. I figured. They're calling it an unauthorized humanitarian intervention. Park almost smiled. Public support is overwhelming. People saw it, Rourke said. That matters. Park looked at the wounded fleet below. History will argue for decades whether this was smart. Rourke finally turned to face him. History wasn't there, she said. We were. The galaxy reacts. Across known space, shockwaves rippled, not from weapons, but from understanding. The Galactic Assembly emergency session was no longer polite. Representatives shouted. How did they defeat a superior force? They ignored protocol. They turned civilians into shields. A smaller delegate spoke quietly, almost afraid to be heard. They turned civilians into people. Reports flooded intelligence networks. Humans did not retreat even when shields failed. Humans absorbed fire meant for cities. Humans coordinated military and civilian assets seamlessly. A classified analysis summarized it best. Humanity treats war as a moral problem, not a mathematical one. The question no one asked before. On Lyra, a provisional council gathered in a half-collapsed hall. Human structural supports already reinforced the ceiling. Ambassador Rise stood before both Lyran leaders and Terran officers. You saved us, she said. We owe you more than words. Rourke shook her head. You don't owe us anything. A murmur passed through the room. Rise tilted her head. That is not how the galaxy works. Rourke met her gaze. Then maybe the galaxy needs practice. Silence followed, not awkward, but thoughtful. Finally, Rise asked the question that had haunted her since the SOS was sent. Why did you come? She asked. Truly. Rourke considered it. Because you asked, she said simply. And because we remember what it's like when no one does. The Carvax learn consequences. Far from Lyra, in Dominion space, Over-Commander Valkyrie H stood before his superiors. His fleet was shattered. His reputation broken. You failed, a high strategist hissed. Valkyr did not argue. Yes, he said. We did. The strategist leaned forward. Explain the humans. Valkyr's voice was quiet, steady. They are not ruled by fear. They do not seek conquest as we understand it. They fight until the threat is gone, and then they stop. Then they are weak, the strategist sneered. Valkyr looked up sharply. No. That is why they are dangerous. He hesitated, then added the sentence that froze the chamber. If we provoke them again, they will not stop next time. Seeds of change. On Lyra, children played near wreckage turned into shelters. Human and alien laughter mixed awkwardly, then naturally. A Lyran teacher watched as a human pilot showed kids how gravity boots worked. One child asked, wide-eyed, "Are you a warrior?" The pilot laughed. Sometimes. Mostly I fix engines. The teacher frowned. But you fought an empire. The pilot shrugged. Someone had to. Humanity looks at itself. Back in Terran space, citizens watched the footage again and again. Burning ships. Shield walls. Silent sacrifice. A young student asked her mother, "Are we heroes?" Her mother thought for a long moment. "No," she said. "We're helpers." The child nodded, satisfied. A new understanding. Ambassador Rise stood once more beneath the open sky. Human ships still lingered above, repairing, guarding, refusing to abandon the world they had bled for. She activated a message, not a plea this time, but a broadcast to the galaxy. "Let this be known," she said. When the universe turned away, humanity stepped forward. Not to rule us. Not to own us. But to stand with us. She paused. And that changes everything. Above her, a Terran ship's engines flared softly as it adjusted orbit. The war was over. But something else had begun.